The biggest XRP question of the century is, how does XRP reach a high price? Well, Verson from Black Swan Capitalist has a great community post here laying out what he thinks is about to happen. I'd like to go through it with you so you can better understand it and we'll have a good conversation. Let's just jump right in. I do have a lot of other news and clips after this, so stay tuned for that as we get through it. So, how XRP reaches a high price when you factor in fractionalization, liquidity, basic economics, and mathematics. When people talk about the value of XRP, they think in terms of conventional assets like stocks and commodities. But XRP was not designed to operate like any of those. It was built to serve as a global liquidity provider and settlement asset capable of bridging hundreds of trillions in value across currencies and tokenized systems. So to understand how XRP reaches an extremely high price, you have to look beyond all of the noise and focus on mathematical design of the XRP ledger, its fractionalized divisibility, and the macroeconomic implications of its intended role as the universal bridge for global settlement. The architecture of the XRP's divisibility. Each XRP can be divided into 1 million units known as drops. This means that if XRP were to reach 10,000, a single drop would still be worth 1 cent. The divisibility is a core design feature that ensures scalability at any price level. It also guarantees that even in extreme valuations, XRP is still practical for everyday and institutional transactions. In other words, XRP can function whether the asset trades at 50 cents or 50,000 per XRP because the network transacts in drops, not whole units. The misconception that XRP must remain cheap to be useful comes from a common misunderstanding of how digital settlement networks can operate. The higher the price of XRP, the more liquid it becomes, since it takes fewer units to settle larger amounts of value. Now let's shift to liquidity efficiency. And for example, imagine a cross-border settlement worth $1 billion. At $1 per XRP, that transaction would require a whole 1 billion XRP units. At 10,000 per XRP, it would require just 100,000 XRP. With fewer tokens moving across the network, there's less slippage and lower volatility with faster finality, exactly what institutional payment corridors and central banks require. This is how a high valuation is achieved, and it's how it enhances XRP's functionality rather than limiting it. When operating as a global bridge currency, be realistic. Its value must be high enough to handle the volume of global liquidity demands without inflating the supply or destabilizing markets. More will be revealed once the Clarity Act is fully enforced and passed. Mark my words, the higher the total value that XRP bridges, the higher its price must be to maintain equilibrium between the two. Global liquidity, demand, and supply. There are 100 billion XRP in total supply, with about half circulating, but the true circulating supply available for global liquidity is even smaller when factoring in held reserves, private custody, institutional lockups, and retail holdings, including myself. If XRP is to serve as a neutral global settlement asset, it has to carry a price high enough to support cross-border liquidity for trade, finance, derivatives, and interbank settlements, markets that total in the hundreds of trillions of dollars annually. To explain this simply, the global FX market settles about $7 trillion per day. The global derivatives market exceeds 600 trillion, and global cross-border payments amount to 150 trillion yearly. Even if XRP were to bridge just a fraction of this liquidity, let's say 1% of global settlements, it would still need to represent those trillions of dollars in value at any given time. Given its limited supply, mathematically, the per unit price would have been high for networks to sustain that kind of liquidity. Let me see here. Given its limited supply, mathematically, the per unit price would have to be high for the network to sustain that kind of liquidity. Fractionalization in institutional settlement. When banks or central institutions use XRP for liquidity bridging, they don't transact in full units. They transact in fractionalized XRP values measured in drops. The fractional capability is what enables XRP to scale to global reserve status without needing to issue more tokens or expand its supply. The fractionalization feature means the system can support both micro payments and macro settlements simultaneously. It's similar to how gold can be tokenized into fractional ownership units. A single ounce can back thousands of dollars in derivatives or digital claims. XRP operates the same way, but through its ledger design. This is why the price per XRP can rise indefinitely without restricting usability. The higher it goes, the more efficiency the network can handle value with fewer units. Value through utility, not speculation. At a certain stage of adoption, the price of XRP won't be determined by market activity. Instead, it will become a function of the total value it moves and liquidity it provides. This utility-based valuation is what differentiates XRP from other cryptos. Bitcoin's value is determined by perception. XRP's value is determined by velocity, demand for settlement liquidity, and macro utility. Interestingly, XRP is already embedded within central banks, sovereign settlement systems, tokenized markets, and IMF and BIS frameworks. Eventually, its price will reflect global demand for it, not retail speculators. This is what we've been talking about for quite some time here. People say, Sensei, why is the price going down if there's all of this utility? We're still just speculating on what these assets' price should be. We haven't reached a point of absolute utility, and these assets are being used on a global scale for everyday transactions. Once that happens, then we can talk about where the price is going to settle. This is the point where XRP transactions from a token to a monetary instrument, priced according to the value of the global system it underpins. This architecture was intentional. XRP was engineered to scale value, not volume. The system is designed to support the full range of economic activity, from retail payments to central bank settlements, through fractional precision and algorithmic efficiency. Conclusion: mathematics of scarcity. XRP's ability to reach a very high price is not a fantasy. It's mathematically necessity if it's to function as a bridge for global liquidity. Its divisibility into drops ensures usability at any valuation. Its finite supply guarantees scarcity, and its design as a settlement layer ensures that the adoption scales, the price follows the function. In a fully integrated digital financial system, XRP's value will reflect the magnitude of what it moves, not who holds it, but what it connects. And so Verson from Black Swan Capitalist, if you want to follow Verson, here is his X page. Go ahead and follow him if you want to. Now, speaking as this, right, this was a very great explanation of where I see XRP's utility and price going eventually here through this, and I thought this was valuable to you. So if you guys like this type of content, please let me know down below so I can create more. Let me know what you think here. Is Verson right? Where do you see this going? I'd like to better understand that. Here's Jazzy Cooper from Ripple X. She explains how multi-purpose tokens function. She used an example of tokenizing a bond with an MPT standard, right? And so we're talking about eventually bringing the stock, the bond, the derivative market, money, like all of these markets on chain. And XRP's utility, they keep adding to it to enable this mass migration onto blockchain so all of this can settle. Let me show you this.
Proposal we put out recently is called multi-purpose tokens. You can think of that along the lines of a semi-fungible token. And that standard allows for developers and token issuers to attach metadata directly to the token object on chain, versus the traditional or legacy fungible token on the XRP ledger, which we call tokens or IOUs, is more of a relational object. So, I owe you $1, you've given me one token. So by allowing a standalone object, this is better for, say a bond where you want to store the terms and the duration, the interest rate, all, on that on-chain object. So we're really trying to look at these use cases and make sure we have the building blocks and the standards to best support them and give, a best-in-class experience when they bring TradFi onto blockchain. Proposal we put out recently is
when they bring TradFi, traditional finance, onto blockchain. That's always been the plan here, ladies and gentlemen. Now, I don't know the politics, what's going on in the UK, but I do know Nigel Farage is trying to become the Prime Minister of England. I have no idea kind of what this guy's background is or who he is, but he did say something very important here about the future of blockchain and crypto, and I think it's valuable and kind of what we're talking about in this video, so I am going to play this.
Folks, it's happening. We're being left behind. There's a global boom in the trade in digital assets, in the use of stable coins, in the usage and investment in whole forms of cryptocurrency. We've literally turned our backs on it, both the Bank of England and the FCA being guilty of this. The reason the city succeeded for hundreds of years is that it innovated, it took risk, It saw what the future direction of markets and consumer and customer and commercial demand would be. And we have done absolutely none of it. And frankly, I believe it's a disaster. We should be leading the world in these 21st century businesses. So our aim would be to sensibly deregulate a rule book that was written for the European Union, not written for the City of London, to think globally, and to have a much more open debate with the Bank of England.
The interesting part here is you're noticing that every single person that is running for office now, wherever it is in the world, is using crypto as a platform to connect with voters. People love their digital assets. They're more connected to the information and the community around digital assets than almost anything else in their lives. And tapping into that is probably one of the smartest things that you can do as a politician. But also you have to deliver on the promises that you've made. We saw a lot of promises by President Trump leading up to the election, and he's followed through with a lot of those promises in the crypto space. So, that is something that other politicians are going to need to follow. But it is also interesting that all of these other countries, they all want to be their own versions of the crypto hub of the globe. And you're just going to have this race for innovation and technology, and it's really going to help adoption globally. Now, there's a few things I wanted to show you here. Most people think of real world assets in trillions, but regulators much prefer to think of it in quadrillions. Let's play these two clips and then we'll end the video.
We've got a really great panel here of people with different experience, but the main thing I would like to really ask you to focus on is not the crypto word. And the reason for that is, as some of you know, I call it a rounding error. It's about 4 trillion. And actually the much bigger opportunity, and I think a much bigger opportunity for Merkel and Riggs, we were talking about it earlier on, is actually what everyone calls real-world assets. I would forget real-world assets, just look at the derivative market. It's 1.2 quadrillion, and we've got a few Americans in your thing, so I can't resist it. If you're an American, put your hand up, please. Right, how many zeros in a quadrillion?
A lot.
How many zeros asked? 12. 12? 18? Yeah. So you can't even agree amongst yourselves. We think it's 24. Now, the reason I mention that is we used to argue about trillions and billions. But it's a lot of noughts. And so when we talk about 4 trillion as opposed to 1.2 quadrillion, and then stick in the funds and the bonds and real estate, and I'm just going to completely ignore data and information. Talking to Shell, what they're doing in Amsterdam, just staggering how they're using the technology. But the biggest tokenizer in the world is which company, before I start the panel? Nope. You all have one in your wallet or your purse or your phone, I suspect. Everything you do, they're tokenized. So this isn't new technology, but we are going to have to learn how to control and manage our exposure to this. And that's what, obviously, Merkel, and that's the whole object of today, is to start thinking and taking, unfortunately, responsibility.
I thought that was a really cool, clip to understand how big of an opportunity this truly is, right? I've never seen anything quite like this where we can get in on the ground level of something so transformative, something I wouldn't even say once in a generation, because changing the entire world's financial system would only happen a few times over, the last 1,000 years, right? And you just are in shock about how big this is going to be and the opportunity you're going to be able to have to provide for your family and the generations to come, right? I'm not just thinking about myself here. I'm thinking about kids and my kids' kids and these types of things. Obviously, I'm not at that point yet in life, but hopefully we'll get there soon. But I'm sure there's people in your life where you maybe just had some kids, or maybe your kids are in high school and they're going to be going off to college soon, and you want to make sure that they are going to be protected for the foreseeable future. In a way that I know parents are trying to do this is they're buying a certain amount of maybe XRP or whatever the token is that they think is going to be here for the long run. And they are putting some crypto aside for their individual kids. So in 5 years or 10 years or in 20 years, when those kids need that capital, they will be able to provide anything they want for their children. I think that's a great way to look at it. All right, guys, let me know what you think about the content. Thank you so much for being here. Have a fantastic week ahead. I'm Crypto Sensei. Aloha.